Hey everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. Today we're diving into a really profound concept from Scott Allan's book, Fail Big. Actually, before we even start, just take a slow, deep breath with me. Think about the last time things, well, really didn't go your way. We usually treat failure like it's the ultimate enemy, right? Like it's the exact opposite of success. But the core argument here is simple, and honestly, it's a total game changer. Failure isn't the opposite of success. It's the very material success is built from. The real danger we face isn't failing. It's the meaning we attach to it.
So I want you to think about that for a second. What if your biggest failure is just a mental cage? It happens to almost all of us. We experience a setback. Maybe it's a rejected application, a business idea that totally flopped, or a personal mistake in a relationship, and we immediately let it mutate. It stops being this simple, temporary event and turns into a toxic identity, one that just breeds fear, shame, and self-doubt. And once that happens, man, those emotions quietly start controlling literally every decision you make moving forward.
Okay, let's dive into this, because there is a massive psychological difference between saying, I failed at this, and saying, I am a failure. Think about it. That first phrase, it's temporary. It's specific to a single event. But the second phrase, wow, that is deeply personal, and it feels entirely permanent. It's like we take one failed exam and suddenly believe, I'm just not smart enough. We face one rejection and tell ourselves, I'll never be enough. See how quickly that escalates?
When we do this, when we internalize a mistake like that, every single setback that comes after it becomes so much heavier than it needs to be. You naturally start behaving more cautiously. You hesitate. You doubt yourself. You completely avoid situations where you might fail again. And that is exactly why failure absolutely must be treated purely as feedback, not as an identity. A failed attempt might tell you, hey, your preparation was weak, or maybe your timing was just off, or your strategy lacked focus. But it should never, ever be used as evidence that you are permanently incapable.
Because when we let failure define us, we develop this deep, deep fear of it. But here's the thing. This fear doesn't always look like sheer panic. It has hidden faces. It quietly controls our decisions behind the scenes. The most obvious one is procrastination, sure. But sometimes it also shows up as perfectionism, or endlessly waiting for the quote-unquote right time. Sometimes it even looks like pretending you just aren't interested in that promotion or that new project. But beneath all those clever little disguises, you aren't lacking ambition. You're just terrified of the judgment, the embarrassment, and the shame that comes with trying and coming up short.
So let's walk through exactly how this plays out in real life through this cycle of limiting beliefs. It's a self-fulfilling vicious cycle. Step 1. You carry an internal assumption that you're going to fail. Maybe you think you're too late to start or you're just not naturally talented. Well, because of that belief, step 2 kicks in. You naturally put in less effort. You don't commit fully, which of course leads to step 3. You quit early or you just avoid the necessary risks altogether. And finally, step 4, you get a poor result, which completely reinforces your original belief. It's wild. These limiting beliefs act as invisible mental prisons, making failure feel absolutely permanent and inevitable before you even start the work.
Now, what's really interesting here is the stark contrast between the two mentalities you can choose after a setback. Because remember, it's not the failure itself that dictates your future, it's the mindset that grows after it. A failure mindset interprets a setback as undeniable proof of personal weakness, which results in hesitation and fear. But a growth mindset, it interprets that exact same setback as pure information and data, which sparks curiosity and learning. A person with a growth mindset still feels the sting of disappointment for sure, but instead of turning inward with shame, they turn outward to look for patterns and lessons.
Part 1. Reclaiming your agency. It is time to take back control.
Okay, so to break out of this cycle, we really have to shift our focus from emotional pain to actionable self-empowerment. And the very first step, destroying your excuses. We constantly tell ourselves things like, oh, I'm waiting for the right moments, or I need to be more prepared, I don't have the right support, or I just don't want to fail publicly. Man, these sound incredibly logical, don't they? But they are actually psychological shields. They protect your ego from discomfort in the short term, but they quietly destroy your progress over time. Every single time you use one of these excuses to avoid a risk, you're training your mind to keep escaping discomfort. You slowly become someone who waits instead of someone who acts.
To overcome this, the source material introduces a tough but really liberating concept: extreme responsibility. Extreme responsibility is reclaiming your power. Now, let's be clear. This isn't about blindly blaming yourself for an unfair world. It doesn't mean outside circumstances don't matter or that bad luck isn't a very real thing. It simply means focusing exclusively on what you control next. Instead of asking, why did this happen to me? You ask, okay, what can I do now? What was actually my control? What can I improve?
And that brings us to a really stark contrast. Blame might perfectly explain why you are stuck. Honestly, it might be entirely factually accurate that circumstances were against you. But only responsibility helps you move forward. If you adopt a victim mentality, you're turning your pain into a permanent identity of helplessness. You completely surrender your agency. And yes, your pain might be completely real and unfair things absolutely happen, but you cannot let that pain become the final authority over your future. Maintaining your personal agency is the only thing that gets you unstuck.
Part 2, the power of self-compassion. How to recover emotionally.
But here is a really critical warning. Adopting extreme responsibility can so easily be confused with harsh self-criticism. I want you to really absorb this quote. Growth does not require self-hatred. Let that sink in for a second. When you fail and respond with an aggressive inner voice, saying things to yourself like, I always ruin everything, or why do I keep messing up? That isn't accountability. That is just emotional punishment. And attacking yourself after every single mistake only produces fear, shame, and complete exhaustion. It is never going to produce consistent growth, because eventually the emotional cost of just trying becomes way too high, and you'll give up.
So the crucial point is this. You need accountability without emotional punishment. True self-compassion doesn't mean lowering your standards, and it definitely doesn't mean making excuses. It simply means telling the objective truth about your mistake, without using that mistake as a weapon to destroy your own self-worth. It's about looking in the mirror and saying, yes, I failed. Yes, I need to improve, but I can learn from this without hating myself. Ultimately, your resilience entirely depends on your ability to recover emotionally.
Part 3. Fail fast, grow faster. It's time to accelerate your growth.
All right, we've broken down the mindset. Now it is time to accelerate and execute. But before we rush in, we have to acknowledge something important. Not all failure is equally useful. If you're experiencing the exact same failures over and over again, that isn't bad luck. That's a pattern of behavior. Habits like inconsistency, poor preparation, quitting too early, negative self-talk, and emotional decision-making, those are the things keeping you in a loop. I mean, if you always abandon a process the second progress gets slow, you can't blame the universe, right? You have to break these habits through honest self-observation so your failures actually teach you something new rather than just forcing you to repeat the same old lesson.
And speaking of habits that hold us back, we really need to call out the biggest imposter of them all. Perfectionism is fear. It masquerades as having high standards, like, polishing a project until 3 a.m. just to avoid actually presenting it. But it's really just a hidden fear of vulnerability. Perfectionism tells you that any imperfect result is completely unbearable, so you delay, you overprepare, and you never actually finish anything. By doing this, perfectionism actively prevents the genuine, real-world repetition and feedback that actually creates excellence. Let's move to and see how this builds into our core solution, the fail fast philosophy. Step 1, take action sooner. Step 2, learn faster. Step 3, adjust quickly. And Step 4, keep going. You really have to empower yourself to stop waiting for absolute certainty, because certainty does not come before action. Certainty only comes after taking action out there in the real world. Action reveals weaknesses that sitting around and overthinking simply cannot reveal. It's a process. You test it, you see what breaks, you fix it, and you keep going.
Of course, taking fast action means you are definitely going to face rejection. But this quote completely reframes that. Rejection is proof that you are participating in life. I absolutely love that. Rejection is not evidence that you aren't good enough or that you should just pack it in and stop trying. No way. Rejection is hard evidence that you are actually in the arena. It proves that you are taking the necessary risks required to grow. Confidence isn't something you just magically build up before taking a risk. It's something that is forged entirely through those moments of discomfort.
Let's anchor this right back to your everyday life. When you don't ask for that opportunity, or when you don't pitch that client, or when you just don't share your ideas because you are terrified of hearing the word no, sure, you might feel safe in the moment. But avoiding rejection quietly shrinks your whole life. A life built solely around avoiding failure teaches you absolutely nothing, except how to stay safe and small. It just leaves you with fewer chances, fewer attempts, and way fewer possibilities. Which brings us to the ultimate question you have to answer today. Will you risk rejection, or will you choose a life of waiting? Success does not belong to people who never fail. It belongs to people who refuse to let failure define them, who study their mistakes,